Uh, we have LuvBay Radio. We have a special guest from Canada, Deputy uh, Mayor Steve Anderson. And I'm hearing a little backlash. I can hear myself repeating myself. um, he's written a book called Driven to Succeed. And hold on, let me do something right quick. Okay, here we go. So I want to read his bio first. It's Steve D. Anderson is the deputy mayor for the town of Shelburne, a regional court councillor for the county of Dufferin. Steve is also a senior lawyer with the Toronto Transit Commission, director, Defense Construction Canada, and a youth mentor with Operation Black Vote Canada. Steve graduated from the University of Windsor with an honors degree in criminology and earned his law degree from the University of, is it Ottawa?
Ottawa.
Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We pretty much already had a show before we even got started. But I'm loving the fact that your book was so key about talking about your youth, talking about how you came from a separated family, and then how you went through some transitions in life from, how you guys moved from a different part of town, you went to school, and I just want to kind of talk about those things. But I want to start off, okay, you have, is it 6 brothers and one sister?
Yes, correct.
And you're the youngest of them all, right?
Yes.
And you're the only one who was born in Canada, is that correct?
That's right, yes, sir.
So tell me, how did that make you feel about being the only one who is not born in Jamaica? Because I think you were saying that you had some identity issues or felt like you didn't fit in. Could you kind of talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I wrote that chapter because I think it would to a lot of people, that feeling of that being the outsider, wanting to fit into that, whether it's the popular group at school, at church, at work, and in my situation, even in my own family, and the desire to want to fit in at all cost, even if it means sacrificing your own identity and your own authenticity. And so who doesn't feel uncomfortable in a new environment, especially when you're the only person, right?
Right.
So you're trying your best to find a way that you could be in the in crowd. And I was no different as a young person, even with my own family. As I talk about in the book, we all had the same last names. You would have assumed we all had the same parents. You would have assumed, well, Steve, I mean, how could you not fit into your own family? But there was a cultural difference, being the only one that was born in Canada. The rest of my family was born in Jamaica. And so as the holidays would come, as you guys are recently celebrating Thanksgiving in the States, imagine a situation where, it's Thanksgiving and the rest of your family is talking about their time in East Oakland, and you were born in Chicago, right? So you have no connection to East Oakland because your life is all about Chicago. And so there's a struggle to, or there's a desire to want to connect, to maybe share a similar story, to imagine in your mind what it was like in East Oakland, for example. But you miss out on that because all of your experience, for example, has been in Chicago. And so that's what it was like for me. I felt like I was a tourist in my own family.
Yes. I was seeing that as I was reading, it was saying that you were even trying to, because they would tell stories about, in Jamaica. And so you would hear these stories. And so you had got enough courage to tell a story, and you said you ended up being the laughing part of the conversation. Kind of share that and how that makes you feel.
Yeah. So, being Canadian, I mean, I have my Canadian accent. And in Jamaica, they speak patois. Some of your listeners may be familiar with what I'm talking about. In essence, a different dialect, in essence. And here I was practicing for weeks that dialect and that patois, so that I could connect with my family, right, in a way when they're telling these stories. And even though I practiced and listened to whatever I could to get that authenticity, when I finally came and had the courage to deliver it at a family dinner, as you pointed out, I became the laughingstock because the authenticity was never there. I sounded like a true foreigner. And that is what happens when you're doing all you can to try to fit into a group. You are either trying to dress a certain way, talk a certain way, but ultimately what one realizes, and I hope what one realizes, and this is what I say in the book, this is very important, is no matter how you try, you can never be somebody else. Mm-hmm. It's okay to learn and to understand about other people's cultures or the environment, but it's okay to be different and be authentic to yourself or true to yourself, and that you don't have to sacrifice that just to be accepted by either a person or a group.
Yes. And I guess that leads into our next question is you talked about in chapter 1, finding myself in a crowd. Let's talk about that, because it's one thing to feel like an outsider out in the community or, among your peers, but it's a different thing when you feel like an outcast in your, within your own family, and so kind of share with me, what were you thinking about when you wrote Finding Myself in a Crowd?
Yeah, I was thinking about, of course, my own experience. And I was thinking that there might be somebody else who is experiencing the exact same thing or have gone through the same thing and may have thought that they were alone in that experience. And to your point, one would easily accept that outside experience out in the community, friendship, work, but seldom do you hear that conversation in one's own family. And that could easily happen when all of your family is born in one place and you're born in another. And all they're talking about is and reminiscing about is that place, and that place that you were not born, that place that you've never gone to. And so just like any conversation, when somebody's having that people are having, and you can't identify with the conversation, there's nothing that you could contribute to the conversation because you haven't had those experiences. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I said earlier, I felt like I was a tourist in my own family. I felt like I was on the outside, always looking in. Mm-hmm. And I was desperate to try to get into the front door, if not the front door, the back door, or to the window. But what I ultimately realized, it was okay. Like I said earlier, it was okay to be myself, and that was a good thing.
So let me ask you a question, because when I was reading your book, I was thinking, I didn't know the target audience that you were writing to. And then after you and I had talked back behind stage, you told me that this was for the youth. But many other people can relate to what you're saying. But even with youth and going through what you went through, and when I say what you went through, so you all moved to a place called, I guess it was Jane Finch, and you move into from apartment to this high-rise building. And it says it had a party room, and it had a sauna, had a huge swimming pool. You said you felt like, you guys had hit the lottery.
That's right.
But it changed, right? Because they closed those things down, but it didn't really say why it closed. But it does happen a lot like that in new developments, especially in areas that are urban, and then something may happen, whether it's gang activity or violence or something, then they start closing things down. What happened to cause them to close that down?
You nailed it. That's exactly what happened.
Okay, that was what happened.
Yeah, it was the drugs and the gangs that were making its way. As I put in the book, they infiltrated the building. Right. Mm-hmm. When I moved in there was, as I mentioned in the chapter, there was no reason for me to leave the building. I had all the amenities that a young person could ask for. All I needed was friends to enjoy it with, and ultimately I did that. But one by one, as I say, they cemented over the pool, they closed the weight room, they closed the sauna. And then they left us with really nothing else to do other than to now explore the community. And it was really then I got a full sense of what was around the corner waiting for me.
And that's what happens a lot of times, that, I mean, you're in a place that is safe. You have all the amenities that you want. They shut all that down. Now you have to go into the community and explore. And a lot of times those things are not positive experiences. Kind of talk to me about that experience that you had when you went exploring.
Yeah, well, when I went exploring, I got a full sense of why these things closed. And there were things that, when I moved from an area of Toronto to this place that I'd never seen. I never seen, drug dealers and prostitutes hanging out in the corner and gangbangers and stuff like that. And I talk about in the book that the wrong turn, when you take a wrong turn on a street somewhere, the consequences that you get lost and you get back on track and you go about your business. In communities like the Jane and Finch community and many others around the world, people who know what I'm talking about, a wrong turn could get you in a lot of trouble. And so I talk about having to navigate the community with surgical precision. Going outside and just saying, I'm just going to go outside randomly or go to the store and just, go here and go there. That's not the way it works in a lot of these communities. You got to know where you're going. You got to know what time you're going to these places, because a wrong move, like I said, could get you into a lot of trouble.
So, excuse me. So where the area that you moved prior to that, what kind of community was that?
It was, and I was younger too. It was more of a residential sort of, I wouldn't say more affluent. Certainly wouldn't say, well, I guess compared to Jane and Finch, yes, it was more affluent there. So these were, the open parks, kids playing all over the place. I had no memory of any trouble or witnessing anything that would cause me to raise my eyebrow, and certainly never heard anything from my parents that gave me any indication that, this was a very problem area. We were moving to this area because we had an opportunity to get a place that was much bigger than what we were living in. And so it was an opportunity to be put in a better position. And they moved to this community to put us in a better position. But I don't think they anticipated what we subsequently found out.
Right, absolutely. It wasn't part of the plan. I mean,
No.
What you all saw was like, hey, this is milk and honey. This is all good. And then all of a sudden, the bad characters just spoiled it all and messed it all up to the point.
I love the milk and honey analogy because, like crossing into Canaan, there were giants. Giants that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah, that's funny. I want to go because this hour is going to go so fast, and there's so much in this book that I enjoyed reading. And the one part that really got me when you started talking about struggling with identity. Kind of talk to me about that, as far as, because a lot of young people struggle with identity for various reasons. But you were talking about it from one stand. But then I think it might have escalated when your father and your mother separated. But first talk, when did you first experience, because a lot of Black men experience this, and it doesn't matter. You're in Canada, I'm in California. It doesn't matter. You can be in Chicago, DC. There's a lot of identity issues. And then a lot of young men start taking on forms of identity that people tell them they are because they don't know who they are.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are multiple layers, as you identified, to this identity issue. One was, again, as I talked about already, about my family. The other identity issue was being in a community, and I talk about this in the book, that would always receive a lot of negative publicity. If anything was on the news about the community, it was about guns, drugs, gangs, and who ended up dead in what area. And, the old saying at the time, and I say this in the book, the question was always posed: what good could come from Jane and Finch? What good could come from Nazareth? Or for those who read the Bible and know the Bible. And so the identity in that situation is, then who am I then? Because when all you see and all you hear is, again, nothing good comes from this area. There's no real value in this area. And so that's the reason why we don't invest. This is the reason why we don't see positivity. This is the reason why, we don't show that we care about the people, because, again, what good could come from this area? We're wasting our time and our resources. Well, a lot of people who grow up in these areas start to question well, what do I have to contribute? They start to internalize the negativity and the negative perceptions. And so that could cause an identity crisis as to, am I a person, again, that could be seen as a success or somebody that's important or of significance or of value? So that was another layer. And then the third layer, certainly, for those who have gone through a divorce, especially as a young child, there is, well, a lot that's going on for those who experience that. I think people will know you're dealing with your whole emotions, your look on relationships change. Your emotions could change. They could get hardened, which is what happened with me. And so there are multiple layers that led to the identity issues that I was dealing with. But fortunately, I was able to rein that in after a period of time.
Yeah, I was reading that in the book, and it was interesting because I was thinking it was going to get worse before it got better, but you caught on to it really quick. And I noticed this a lot of times, and you hit it on the nose, and you and I had talked about it. I'm saying I'm from East Oakland, and a lot of times that's what people used to say when we were growing up. Is anything good come out of East Oakland? But it was a lot of great things that was coming out of it. A lot of great people was doing great things. So, they put this stereotype on a specific type of location or environment, and they talk about it to the point that we start hearing it so much that we begin to start biting and believing the lie. So then if there's nothing good and this is all we are as drug dealers or hustlers or pimps or whatever, then that's who we are. We might as well go ahead and go all out, rather than looking on the other side and saying, you know what, there's more to me than what the community is saying or what people are saying. But what really got me with you was the fact that you had, and you talked about this teacher, I guess it was Mr. Lynn.
Yeah.
And now talk to me about Mr. Lynn, because Mr. Lynn seemed like he came in your life at a very critical time.
Yeah. So, we talked about the community. We talked about the separation of the parents. We talked about my identity issues. And then on top of that, when I was in grade 7, I was inexplicably, in my view, placed into this ESL program, English for a second language, and as a second language. I talk about how embarrassing that was. And I think a lot of people, to be honest with you, a lot of Black and brown people in our community were funneled into these kinds of programs for in my view, no good reason other than the fact that people didn't expect much from us. And so it was easy to funnel us into these kinds of programs. And once again, I became discouraged. I began to question myself, how is this happening to me? It was just one thing after another, right? And here he came, and he was a guy that didn't allow me to mope into my own pity, or as they would say, cry in my own beer, so to speak, right? And kept motivating me every step of the way. And he's like, Steve, listen, you're here, but if you want to change your circumstances, you have to do something about it. You have to put in the work. And he kept speaking with such positivity and accountability. That's important. With positivity and accountability, that I started to believe it and started to change my mindset. And then I went from being in that class, and I was only there for maybe about a month, if that. And then I was transitioned out of that ESL program. And so just think about it. If it's basic, general, and advanced, I was put in this very basic level, again, for no explicable reason. And by the time I was finished with him within a month's period, I went from basic right to an advanced English. So it's a shout out to educators who are pouring into the students, educators who are doing things the right way and are not looking at color, but looking at content and developing that content to allow that child to be the best that he or she could be.
And it seemed like when you said that you wanted to, I guess you got a pass after he had told you that you're going to this advanced class, and then you went to the office, or you was so excited you went to an individual to tell them that you're moving out into advanced, and they're saying, no, you're going to stay here. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I talk about racing to the office like I was Usain Bolt. Excited about the encouragement that I received. I was now getting out of basic to advance. I was gaining some form of freedom. So you can imagine the feeling. And so when I got to the guidance office, the guidance teacher was there, and I approached and I said, very excitedly, Mr. Lin says I should be out of this basic course and transition into English. And she went and got my file, and I could see her licking her finger and going page after page for what seemed like an eternity. And then she stopped and looked dead in my eye and said, Steve, I hear you with what Mr. Lin has said, but in my opinion, you're a C student at best. And so if you want to get out of this class, you need more than Mr. Lin's. You need to have one of your parents come down and sign off on this, as if this was some sort of bail. Like this, it was a great risk to the community that I needed extra bond surety or something in this teacher's opinion. And so luckily I was able to get my mom to come down and sign off on it. And that's when I was able to make the transition. So even when you are making the upward progress, there's always sometimes somebody there that's trying to push you back down, right? Life is not a linear pathway to success. There are going to be challenges and obstacles and people who see you ascending and want to pull you back down. But the key is to keep focused and to keep driven. And eventually you will get there. And as I say in the book, some of us will have to climb the rough side of the mountain to get to the top.
That's right. That's right. And it was good that your mom was able to get off, but sometimes some mothers are working 2-3 jobs, are not able to get off. There's maybe a single mother or whatever. And so what would happen? You'd be penalized to stay there based on somebody's personal opinion.
That's exactly right. And unfortunately, this is what we would call a lot of brothers and sisters falling into the cracks and staying in the cracks, right? Because once you lose the advocacy, if there's no Mr. Lin, and I don't have the teacher to come down to say, or my parent rather, to come down and say, you know what, it's time to take Steve out of here. I don't know where I would be.
Right.
And just imagine how many other students who didn't have that advocacy that have fallen through the cracks. And as we talked about earlier, internalized the negativity and said, well, you know what, if nobody believes in me, then I might as well just go all out, as you said, and just become that person that they perceive me to be.
Well, I always tell a lot of young men growing up, I was told by an individual that I would never live to see 16. And I was told that just about every day. And like you said, internalizing that from an individual that you trust, that you would not live to see 16, the lie became a reality. And so I began to say, well, if I'm not going to live to see 16, then I might as well do everything I can before 16. And anything after 16 is a bonus. So what that does is, and I think you talked about it in your book about, really, you talked about adult, I guess from childhood to adulthood, switching it, and we'll get to it. I'm kind of fast forward, but I have to talk about this because a lot of Black and brown kids do not experience the whole cycle of childhood to adolescence to adulthood. They go from childhood to adulthood, and we miss a phase in a part of our lives that are very critical, but because we have to, even, and the mother, she might not mean it by harm, but she said, little man, you the man of the house, and so she starts putting responsibilities on him. And he's like the man in the house of 10 years old, or we talked about the emotional piece where, we shut those off because it's like, hey, shut up, stop crying, be a man. I'm a man, I'm 5 years old, I'm supposed to cry, but these emotional pieces begins to start being torn away from who we are. And we become to that hardness that you talked about, that heart begins to get hard, that anger begins the simmer in, and then we start doing things that, is not who we are.
And a lot of that, and that's what happens when the family structure breaks down, right? Young boys feel like they have to step up, whether it's because the mother has said so, or they've watched and feel that they have to do so. Somebody has to fill the gap. And if you're already in a marginalized community, you're saying to yourself, look, I got to do whatever I have to do. I was just watching a documentary on Biggie Smalls just yesterday. And he talked about, growing up in a marginalized community in Brooklyn, how, look, he had to take care of his family. He had a young daughter at the time, and he had to do what he had to do, right? And many of us find ourselves, as you say, that phase of childhood, adolescence, adulthood has now been condensed significantly, where many of us now feel we have to go do what we have to do. Now you may say, well, why does drugs have to be what he has to do or she has to do? Well, when you're dealing with barriers and systemic barriers, systemic discrimination and racism, these kinds of things often leave one with little options. I'm not saying that these are excuses to stay in these situations or to fall into the cracks, but it certainly makes your ascent upwards to be able to transition out of these situations a lot harder. And if you don't have the support, it's quite easy to fall into these cracks. And so, we tend to look at the drug dealer and say, man, the person's throwing their life away, bad him, bad her. But there's a whole list of reasons as to why they get there in the first place.
Absolutely. No, I agree. If you just tuned in, we are interviewing Deputy Mayor Steve Anderson from Canada, and he's talking about his book, Driven to Succeed. And we're talking about issues that are not just based on in Canada, but really anywhere where there's people of color, systemic racism, barriers, and all kind of other things that have hindered us from being who we are. One of the things I want to talk about, since we're on this subject, is setbacks are not an excuse for failure. We hear a lot of times that seems like a profound thing from a father or somebody who will not tolerate an excuse. But how did you get to that point to write that chapter in your book?
Yeah, I wanted to be better than what I was perceived to be. So growing up in these kinds of areas, you can't help but have a chip on your shoulder to want to prove everybody wrong, right? And to show what you're capable of. And so I say that despite the repeated obstacles, there was always that burning desire to want to show somebody or show the world that I am somebody of worth and I am capable. And so, you have to have a purpose. You have to have a drive. Hence the title of the book, Driven to Succeed. You have to have something that allows you to weather the storm of inevitable challenges and obstacles. Because I say, if you don't have that inner purpose and that drive, you'll be like the proverbial leaf in the wind that as soon as there's resistance or that first wind blow, you see the leaves blowing all over the grass, blowing out into the road, blowing all over the place because they're not rooted into anything firm, right? Mm-hmm. And so your purpose and your drive is what allows you to be able to withstand rather the resistance. The other thing for me is why I didn't want to use obstacles as an excuse not to succeed is when I looked at the sacrifices that my mom had made once my father had departed, and understanding what she had to give up to allow us to have a semblance of normalcy, the fortitude that she had to go, the fact that she buried her emotions. She never said anything negative about her father, even after he left and the predicament that we were in. I wanted to make sure that her sacrifices were not in vain. So I wasn't prepared to allow any excuse or any obstacle, rather, to get into the way of what I felt I needed to do.
So, let me ask you a question. So when your dad, because when I read in your book, it talked about when you came home, your mom was on the couch and you knew something was wrong because she wouldn't be home typically at that time. You said you went upstairs, you realized that the closet was empty for where your father was, but it didn't really go in any more deeper than that as far as like, oh, well, it did say that he set a time for you and your brother to meet. And then he said it wasn't going to continue to be that way. And then you never seen him anymore. How did it go?
Yeah. Talk about falling off a cliff. Yeah. So, that situation, as you mentioned, happened where, dealing with the shock and awe of seeing somebody who plays a significant role in the family. We talked about this backstage, the importance of the father being a gatekeeper, as you said previously, and then realizing that gatekeeper, that rock is now gone, right? And so there was wrapping my head around that and many other things going through my mind. And before the dust could even clear, for whatever reason, he decides to reach out to myself and my brother, who was a couple of years older than me, my brother Chester. And you see a picture in the book where both of us are wearing these number 10 jersey shirts. We went to a place called Hyde Park in downtown Toronto. He took us there. And we went with, as I say, cautious optimism, right? Because, of course, you're skeptical. You're wondering what's going to happen. What does this all mean at the end of the day? But we had a good time. And he dropped us off with the assurance that we would be seeing each other again soon. And then the phone never rang after that. And I'm talking about, I'm not talking about for a week or two. I'm talking about we hadn't seen him or heard from him for over 20 plus years, if not 30 years. So it was as if he had just vanished. And in fact, he went on to start a new life and got a new wife, from what I understand, and had other children and stuff like that. So he went about his business as we were left to deal with ours. And so it ends abruptly like that, because that's exactly how it happened. It was abrupt, just like that.
And let me just go back to that. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but how did that make you feel at that time, having a father and then not having a father? And not be, I mean, because a lot of times young men or women, whoever's dealing with this particular situation, takes fault because of that. They say, well, maybe it's something that I did that was wrong, what caused my father to leave. I don't know if that made you feel that way or not, but kind of walk me through that scenario.
Yeah, that's a great question. So no, I never felt that I had contributed to the departure. But I felt like maybe, and I think maybe some people will identify with what I'm about to say. I felt like, how do I put this? I'm like, I became more mature, or I became a man faster than I needed to be. And what I mean by that is, I took on the mindset, well, look, he's gone. It's okay. Everything's going to be fine. We're just going to go about our business and do what we need to do. And so in my young mind at the time, I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going to allow this to impact me. I'm just going to bury this, and we're just going to move on. And so there was an emotional part of me that was now shut down. There was walls now that were erected. And when we talk about impact, even though in my mind, I thought this was not going to impact me, there's no question how I viewed relationships, how I decided to be vulnerable, how much I was going to share with myself, because I think in my subconscious, some of the moves that I've made as a young adult and even as an adult, I think were guided by what I had seen or the trauma that I had gone through. And so as much as we think we're stepping up and being a man and we're saying, this is not going to impact me, we're going to step up and we're going to do what we got to do. And who cares if he's gone, we're still going to move on. I don't know if that's entirely true. As much as we bury it, it doesn't mean that it's gone. And I think for those who have gone through the situation, I think it's important to have somebody to talk to get these thoughts and these feelings out. Because again, for me, I buried it for years, and it was below the surface, but in some form or fashion, it would rear its ugly head. And so it does have an impact. You can't lose, let me just put it this way. You can't lose somebody who's significant and plays a significant role in your household and expect that they're going to have no impact on you whatsoever. And I think we are just fooling ourselves if we think, I know, especially as young men, we are socialized not to show emotion or to seem weak. And so at every step of the way, we have to be tough. We're not going to cry. We're going to be that rock for everybody else, even as a young child in a situation like that. But I don't know how helpful that is, because what ends up happening is you're internalizing a lot of anger and frustration. And at some point, it's going to come out and impact somebody.
No, absolutely. And it does, it affects us, a lot, because, other counterparts, they can go and get, therapy or a psychologist or somebody to kind of walk and talk with them through this process. But if you don't have the money or the medical, then you're kind of stuck. And you hear a lot of young men say, well, my father never was in my life and it didn't really matter. I made it. But it did impact you in some way. It impacted you in other relationships. It impacted you in rejection issues or abandonment issues. There's all kind of stuff that you may not. And I talked to some cold cats, man, some guys supposed to be really hard, but they don't want to have these kind of conversations because it makes them vulnerable. And it exposes them to the point that they start crying, and because those emotional pieces they didn't know was a part of them, because they shut it off, because they never want to visit it, they never want to talk about it, they never want to deal with it, they just continue to suppress it. So that's why I'm having this conversation. I didn't plan on driving on it too hard, but I just wanted to talk about it because there's a lot of young people that's out there that's going through a place where they don't have a father, they never had a father. And they're trying to find this thing called manhood and identity, and because they don't know who they are, they take on the form of identity that the streets tell them that they are. And these is cats, man, that's telling them who they are, that never had a father, never know anything about the definition of a man. They're giving you the definition of what they think a man is supposed to be, and it's all false.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I'm glad that you touched it. As we talk about burying these things and thinking it has no impact, and especially when you become a father yourself, what example do you have to be able to pass on to your children so that you're not making the same mistakes? So there's no question. I don't care who you are, it impacts you in some way or the other. I don't care how tough as men we want to be, and that's why grown men, when they reflect on these things, it'll bring tears to their eyes, because to your point, they suppress it. It's interesting because I had suppressed it for so many years. And when I went to go write this book, it forced me to relive those moments, and those things resurfaced. And it was an emotional journey, right? And so in some form or fashion, it will come back up and you will have to deal with it.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you one question about your daughter, because you have a daughter, right?
Yes.
And her name is Asia?
Asia, yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm just making sure I got the right one. How is your parenting skills or your relationship with Asia, and how was that transition as far as, you're being successful and driven to succeed, but how has that helped you become a father, or even see some things about yourself that you probably didn't want to see before?
So I have a son and daughter. So my son is Devontae, okay. My daughter is Asia. I think I did, when I became a parent, I for many of the individuals who have gone through this situation, I think the first thought that comes to your mind is, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to be like my mother or like my father, right? And what they did to me. So there's this really overcompensation to be the best dad or the best mother you could be, because you want to be able to show that you've learned something, and you're not going to be this person that you now despise, or a person that you now think negatively of because of what you've gone through. And so the very first thoughts I had was just that. I'm not going to be like him. I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to abandon my own children. I'm going to be there for them. They're always going to have that relationship with me. And thank God that we have an excellent relationship. We continue to have an excellent relationship. My daughter is in law school right now. My son is finishing up university. Yeah, she's in her second year of law school. So we have an outstanding relationship. And let me just pause to say this is, and I talk about their mother in the book as well, and how we had 2 young children in university and the stresses of dealing with that. But we did it because we valued education, and we did it because we had a great support system around us. And as much as we tried, the relationship didn't work. And that's okay. Sometimes relationships don't work out, but it doesn't mean that you don't take care of your responsibilities. It doesn't mean that you can't have a cordial relationship with the person that you had a relationship with, right? And so even though the relationship in that sense dissolved, we continue to work together as partners, raising our children. And so even though the children understood, and they would have preferred, obviously, if we were together, they didn't miss out on the care and the love that they could receive and needed to receive from both parents.
I love that. I love that. That's what I'm talking about. And I wish that more of us will get past the emotional piece and understand that it's about the children, and what can we do to work together for the benefit, because for the common cause is that we have this child, and we have to raise them together, whether we like each other or not, And so I love that. I commend you on that, even with the fact that you had some barriers, and you could have easily just said, you know what, I'm out too, but you stayed in there and worked together. That I commend you on that.
Appreciate that, my brother. Yeah, it's important. Again, it's we have to focus on the children, and we could put our personal differences aside and work towards that common goal. So, yeah.
So let's get back to your book. Show me your company, and I will tell you who you are. That's what your mom told you, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
And which, a lot of times we have a saying here that if you hang with dogs, you're gonna catch some fleas. So come talk to me about this. Show me your company, and I will tell you who you are. What made your mom tell you that?
Well, for the obvious reasons. If you're rolling with bad apples, then you could expect to be a bad apple yourself, right? And start to take shape and the characteristics of bad apple, because you put a rotten fruit into a barrel of good fruit, and what ultimately happens, the other fruits start to take on the shape and the smell and the discoloration of the bad few fruits that were in that basket. And so what one needs to do is recognize it's time for me to get out of this basket. The unfortunate thing is many of us don't have that sense of urgency. We stay in that basket for whatever reason, and then we get tainted and it's too late for us, right? And so that's why I talk about it in that chapter, the importance of friendships and selecting the right friends. And I say how we put a lot of emphasis on finding the right spouse and the right job and finding the right house in the community to go live in. But I don't know if we give as much of attention as it should to, especially when you're young, not just when you're young, but especially as you're young, in choosing the right people that you surround yourself with. Because as I say in the book, they could either bring you way down here or bring you to new heights that even you yourself have not imagined, right? And that's what happened eventually for me. These friends, these new friends that I met when I started hanging with the wrong crowd, these new friends held me accountable. These new friends were talking about becoming doctors and lawyers. And I say to folks, it's not that they were not living still in this marginalized community. Some of them were living in the same building as me. They had a winner's mindset, even though they were still in a marginalized community. And these kinds of things allowed me to restore my confidence, to look at myself the way I always looked at myself, and to get me back on track and to be accountable for my actions. And so that's what I was trying to get at in that book, that we really need to hone in and making sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right people.
And that leads to the next subject. When you change schools, because it seems like when you change schools is when you begin to change your mentality, change your friends, and then you started, improving on you. You even said that some of the kids, the guys that you used to hang with, would say that you was a sellout, or you didn't represent the neighborhood, or you didn't dress like the cue, that they would dress, because you started wearing slacks and white shirts and cufflinks. And I mean, you were, even I read in the book that you guys even went on job interviews and got your jobs because of the way you carried yourself and how well you was dressed and how you presented yourself. And that said a lot about the company that you were associated with.
The way you present yourself to the world is very important. Yes, you could have freedom of expression when it comes to yourself, but the reality is the way you present yourself could have pros and it could have cons. So if you want to be a person that has tattoos all over your face, you could go ahead and do that. But there may be some consequences as you try to get into certain fields in our community, in our society. And so I'll just give you an example, just so you know. I don't want to make it seem like I'm just talking about everybody else. Even now, today, as I mentioned, I have a son. As we talk about presenting ourselves to the world, and I'll just share this. This just happened yesterday, actually. My son, for the last year and a half, decided that he was going to grow his hair into dreadlocks, right? And that was his decision. Both myself and his mother was like, listen, you know what? You want to present you a certain way. Some people will look at you and have different perceptions. If you're trying to get a job in certain places, they'll look at you, maybe hold that against you, etc. But this is what he wanted to do. And so he did what he felt he needed to do. He called me yesterday and he said to me, Daddy, you're the first person I called. So I said, what's going on? He goes, I decided to cut my hair because I need a new start, and I need to be professional, and I need to be taken seriously, and there are goals and things that I need to achieve, and this is just one step in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you have to let go of certain things to be able to go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so changing schools and being in that environment was something that I needed to do to have that fresh start, to be able to move in the direction that I needed to go. And so that was the reason why I emphasized that in the book. So whether it's friends or old friends that are trying to keep you down, keep you to the streets, trying to say, yo, man, like, just stay. Why are you trying to chase the white man, dressing, you're starting to talk like these guys. Yo, man, you're selling out, man. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to be able to say to those guys, yo, brethren, like, I just got to step out. I got to do what I need to do. And be prepared to lose some of these folks if that's what you need to do to get where you need to get. But that takes courage, right? And that takes a focus and a drive to say, as much as I'm hearing these things, I'm not going to succumb to these things, because I got to keep moving forward.
You talked about Mr. Lynn, but then you didn't really say who the teacher was. You just said the 11th grade teacher.
Yeah. I couldn't remember, to be honest with you, I couldn't remember her name, and that's why I referred to her as the that teacher. I couldn't remember her name, but so when I made that transition to this new school, and I started to take this law course, and I was saying in the book that prior to taking this course, I was all over the map. I wanted to be a real estate agent, basketball player, really trying to find myself as to where I would fit in. I wanted to be successful.
Bus driver,
exactly. I wanted to be successful, but I didn't know the avenue per se. But this one teacher in this course, after a while, I was doing well in the course, and she asked me to stay behind after one class, and she said, Steve, I want to chat with you for a second. I'm thinking in my mind, okay, what did I do, or did I get myself into trouble somehow? And she said to me, I've been observing, I've been watching you, Steve, and if you continue to stay focused, the things that I see in you, that I think that one day you'd be an excellent lawyer. And that planting of that seed, I talk about in the book that at first when she mentioned it, I laughed, but she said it with such seriousness and conviction that before I left that classroom, I started to believe that I could become that. And then that trajectory and those movements towards becoming a lawyer really started with those powering words of inspiration from her. So again, a shout out to educators who are doing things the right way. And it may not be an educator. It may be your grandma. It may be your grandpa. Maybe your mom or your dad or your sister. Just a shout out to people in general who are planting these seeds of inspiration and hope into young people.
Unfortunately, I mean, when I was growing up, you had a lot of teachers like that that were committed to your success and would speak into your life and come to your house. If you weren't doing right, they'd come to your house and talk to your parents and explain to them. And I know that they're underpaid, and I know that they don't get what they used to get, or for whatever reason. I don't really know what the reason is, but you're right. We do need more educators that are going to pour into people and really actually speak into your life and tell you something that they see that you don't see in yourself, because it sounds like that was the turning point that made you make the decision that you wanted to become a lawyer. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And so talk to me when you went to, we got about 12 minutes, so I got to fast forward. You went to college, your brother took you to college. You had to deal with the reality of growing up. You didn't have a meal in the microwave. You didn't have fresh clothes that was folded up, and you had to split a little room with somebody that didn't look like you. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, man, this is growing into adulthood, as I was saying. I think it was like a fast. I think it was a fast track or fast course to adulthood. I think it was a chapter, but yeah, I mean,
the crash course on adulthood.
Crash course on adulthood. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, at home, whether it was wrong or right, I didn't have to worry about the laundry and the folding of the laundry. I didn't have to worry about the food on the stove. Those things were taken care of. And then when I went and I was now on my own, and my brother drove off, and it was just me myself. the hardcore reality came in that, look, I'm responsible for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got to figure this out fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about at the early stages, as I was now making this transition, I was often on the telephone, long distance, calling my mom and saying, listen, could I put white and colored clothes in the laundry together? How long do I leave the rice on the stove? What seasoning should I do? Should I get for the chicken to do it the way that you do it? And so there was a lot of that I was tapping into at the very beginning until I started to get comfortable with being on my own. And then I talk about, being responsible and figuring out a way to be responsible for myself. And then not too long after that, I became responsible for others because, as you know, then I had 2 children while I was in university.
Yeah, it's funny that, and I gotta commend you because you finished up. You finished the race. You didn't give up. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm gonna take care of my family," and that's not saying good or bad. But you like, hey, I'm gonna do. I started this. I'm gonna complete it. I just want to talk about my daughter. I actually have a 33-year-old daughter, but then I actually have a 15-year-old daughter. And I was talking to her the other day because I told her, I said, I'm not washing any more clothes for you. And I said, you're of age, you know how to wash clothes. You take the clothes, you put the colors with the colors, the whites, because I'm thinking about what you just said. I told her, you're going to go to college one day and you're going to need to know how to do this. And so you need to start doing this now so you can understand how to do it. And, she got mad at me, but hey, she ran out of clothes. She had to wash some clothes. And so, yeah, I get that, man. So how did that work when you were in college and you were making that transition and you were, you got these kids and now you still gotta, succeed and you didn't give up. How did you navigate through that? And not really understanding what it means again to be a father, because you didn't really have a father that was there to kind of help you through that process.
First and foremost, I would say the mindset. I still wanted to stay the course, and I still wanted to finish, as you said. So that was important. But it wouldn't have been possible, even with the mindset, if I didn't have a partner who shared a similar mindset. And her name is Sherry Ann, as you know, in reading the book. And she valued education. She wanted to finish the race as well. And so as a team, we found ways to make it work. Even though we were both new parents at the time, we hadn't had it figured out, but we made the decision to try to figure it out together. We were also fortunate to have support from family and friends that also allowed it to be possible. And some people don't. They have the desire, they have the will, but they don't have the support. And that's why for some, they have to drop out of school. And as you said, there's no judgment either way. You have to do what you have to do. We were just fortunate to have all those ducks in a row that allowed us to be able to finish. And even with the support, it was challenging. But by the grace of God, we were able to make it to the finish line, as you said.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had a partner that was willing to work with you and not give up. We need more of that. A lot of times we're not together. I don't want to have nothing to do with you. I don't want you to be with anybody else. And then we start using the kids as pawns, and it's just it's not fair to them and it's not fair to us. So I'm glad that you had someone that was willing to say, hey, look, we in this thing together, and I want you to finish, because your success is her success and the children's success, whether you're together or not. So that's that's driven to succeed in itself.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we were together when we were in university, so it was natural that we were working together for the common good. When our relationship ended and it was now for me to apply to law school and move to a completely different area to go to law school, it would mean now that she would be alone with the 2 kids. And talking about having that respect and that admiration and that partnership, even though we weren't together anymore, it was a conversation that I felt we needed to have, and I needed to have her support and blessing, because without that, without her deciding, look, I'm going to hold this down, I'll do what I have to do, you'll help when you can, but we believe in your vision and what you're doing. And to your point, when you do finish the finish line, what we're betting on is that our circumstances will improve. And thank God I was able to do that with their support, and the circumstances did improve. And as I mentioned before, we continue to have a great relationship, supporting each other in our respective endeavors.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Law school, the unconventional way.
Oh, my. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that.
Well, even in life, when things are looking positive, it doesn't mean that you are immune to continued setbacks and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
When I was applying to law school, I applied to a number of Canadian schools, which would have been obviously more advantageous to me because I obviously live in Canada. I applied to schools that were closer to where my family and friends lived. It would be easier to be closer to my children, be that support system, etc. Unfortunately, I didn't get into a Canadian school. I got into the University of Detroit Mercy, obviously in Detroit. But I was still committed to pursuing the dream. I wasn't going to allow the fact that I didn't get into a Canadian law school prevent me from crossing that finish line, as we talked about. When I was in Detroit, it was difficult. I went from paying, having my tuition taken care of with funds provided by the government, to now having to find out how I was going to pay for tuition at the University of Detroit, which was over $20,000 US. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I got from the government was $5,000 Canadian. So I was in a major gap. Through a lot of prayer and fasting and support from my family, I was able to get a job on campus at the University of Detroit that allowed me to pay for my first year tuition. But even though I got that, I finished the year well academically, got involved in the school spirit and programs, got elected as vice president for the first year of law school. Like, things were going well from that standpoint. But when the year ended, I knew I couldn't go back because I didn't have the money. And so I took a year off and had to work. And so I say in the book, 1 year I'm sitting in a law class with my peers, and then the next summer I'm working for a collection agency calling students on their defaulted student loans. Wow. And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on with me? Like, this is so surreal, right? I'm the person just a few months ago is depending on those student loans to get to school. I'm sitting there with other students, and now I'm at this job months later calling students and saying, listen, you need to pay up on your student loans. And there were many times where I was thinking, like, you know what? Finally, I'm seeing the sun through the clouds. Things are starting to open up, and then bang, it seems like the clouds come back again. And many people, I'm sure, listening to this could identify with that. Finally, you're seeing that break, that glimmer, and then something hits you again. And so, yes, there were times where I was sitting there on the job thinking, am I ever going to get back? Why is this happening to me? Finally, I was getting a break, and now this again. So I save up enough money. I'm now at the school is about to start, and I go on to the website, to the university website of Detroit, and I'm researching on the website, and I see something called a letter of permission. So I'm thinking, okay, it got my attention. And so in essence, very quickly, what it is, it allows you to study 1 year abroad at any school, whether it's in the US or anywhere else, for 1 year, but you must come back to your home school, which is Detroit. So I got the permission to go from my school, being Detroit, and I contacted my best friend who was at a Canadian law school and I said, yo, man, why don't we do this letter of permission together at a Canadian school of our choice? So he was in agreement with it. And we both applied to the University of Ottawa together. And so we got in for this 1 year. And I talk about when I was there, I went from paying $20,000 US to paying $5,000 Canadian, right? Closer to family. I'm loving the school. And I felt like I was Cinderella at the ball. I didn't want the clock to strike 12, right? I didn't want to go back to cleaning up in the kitchen, right? I wanted to stay there. So I devised a plan to figure out how could I stay in Ottawa and not go back to Detroit Mercy, Detroit Mercy Law School. Wow. And so I made an appointment with the associate dean, and I said to the dean, I said, listen, I love the school here. I'd love to stay here. What could I do in order to gain acceptance into the University of Ottawa? And he rocked back in his chair and he looked up at the roof, rubbed his hands like this, and then leaned back and said, Steve, first of all, I appreciate your feedback with respect to our program, but what you're asking for has never been done in the history of our school. unfortunately, Steve, you're going to have to go back to Detroit and fulfill that contractual obligation. So I said I left disappointed, but not deterred, because I said to myself, I got to find a way to stay here at all costs. I continued to work hard, get good grades. I participated in a lot of programs on campus. And I had one Black professor that really championed my cause. She was a constitutional professor, Joanne St. Louis, and she really took a liking to me, saw what I was about. And to make a long story short, she went to the dean at the end of the year and said, we have to keep Steve in our school. He would add value to the program. School ended. I was unsure about my fate. And then I got an email from the dean, not the associate dean, from the dean of the law school, an email that said, Steve, congratulations, you've been accepted to the University of Ottawa. And I never went back to Detroit. I graduated from the University of Ottawa Law School. And then I was able to get a job working in my field after that. And it just goes to show you that, despite what happens in your life, God has a plan for you, and you just have to stay the course, be patient, because even though it seems, and especially for our young people, even though it seems that everybody is on the fast track to success, everybody is ahead of you. Just take your time. You will get to where you need to be at the right time.
Amen. Amen. Well, look, we're out of time, man, but I want to be able to let you tell the people how they can purchase your book. If you just joined us, this is Steve Anderson. Driven to Succeed is the name of his book. And tell the people how they can purchase your book and how they can contact you in case they need to contact you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So you could go several ways. One, you could go to my website, which is www.driventosucceed.ca, www.driventosucceed.ca, or just go to Amazon and type in Driven to Succeed, Steve Anderson, and you're able to get the book there. And you could follow me on social media, whether that's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or on LinkedIn under Deputy Mayor Steve Anderson, and you'll see me there. And I'd be happy to have you as a follower, and certainly in turn I will follow you. So that's where you can find me on social media.
Do it one more time, and just want to make sure they get it. So one more time.
Yeah. So you could go to my website at www.driventosucceed.ca, or just go directly to Amazon. Amazon, most people have Amazon accounts. Just go directly to Amazon, type in Driven to Succeed, Steve Anderson, my name, and you'll be able to get a copy of the book on Amazon delivered right to your house. Especially if you have Amazon Prime, you probably could get it tomorrow. And again, you can find me on Facebook, anywhere on social media under Deputy Mayor Steve Anderson.
I really appreciate this interview, man. I love, what God has done in your life. I mean, he's been carrying you all the way through all of the pitfalls and the barriers and, just the disappointments. And I mean, a lot of young men that go through what you go through or went through, didn't come out on the other side the way you did. And I just praise God for your life and the example that you are, and being a mentor and writing a book for youth to read, to give them hope, to be a role model. I'm so happy to hear your story, and even how you work together in co-parenting, and even the father that you are. I take my hat off to you, sir.
I appreciate it, my brother. This was a truly a blessing. Thank you so much.
Let me close in a word of prayer with you. Gracious God, I thank you for my brother, God. I thank you for his life. I pray that you continue to let him shine. I pray that people would understand that they, specifically young people, would understand that although the course is not the one they choose, they still can succeed if they don't stop, they don't give up. And he's a living witness. And I'm thanking you, God, for his life. I pray that you open up doors from him from the east to west, to south, to north, that he would be able to impact young men, women, just by his story, just by his life and his faith. Let him continue to be the man that he is, the father that he is. Lead him, guide him, and instruct him in the way that he should go. Continue to navigate and keep him, God, because he wants to be kept. We love you, we praise you, and we honor you, and we give you all the glory for his life. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen.
Amen. When you receive a word from the Lord, let the church say amen.
Amen. All right, brother. Again, it's a pleasure.